So we're back here live from Kultur, and I'm standing here with Professor Luc Noppen, who is a professor at the University of Quebec in Montreal. Yes, at the Department for Urban Studies.
We have a Department of Urban Studies and Tourism, but I'm involved with the Urban Studies and Heritage Studies.
Yes. Can you tell us some of the highlights of your presentation today?
Well, I just want to say, want to talk about the specific conditions we have in Quebec. We have legislation and ownership of churches built by the French regime from the 17th century, and now we're working with that. So even the French changed their mind. So we have private ownership of churches, which makes it very difficult to have a regional planification like you could have here or in other countries, because every parish decides what they do with their church when the bishop decides to close it. So
is that common?
Well, it's uncommon. It's a 17th, 18th century situation that's going further in Quebec. In Ontario, the next province, the bishop owns all the churches all over America. So in our case, the bishop can close a parish, but he cannot sell the church. It's the parish that sells the church. So the people want to keep their church, and the bishop maybe would like to have some money from the sale of the churches, because to balance his budget. And so there's a kind of struggle between the diocese and the local parishes about the future of the church. So we work to keep the churches open to the public and maybe work as community centers and try to avoid that these buildings would go to the private market, because all the examples we have of private use church, people say, well, it's fabulous, I can buy a church for about nothing and I'm going to make a lot of money. It doesn't work, because the private enterprise is not aimed to put money in heritage. They want to make, and the church buildings, they're not square meters, they're cubic meters.
Really big buildings.
Yeah, and the cubic space, big space. And so you need the whole community and maybe the municipality coming behind them to help to keep up with these buildings.
Is it like a people's movement or a community movement to keep the church buildings and preserve them?
Yeah, well, it's not, it doesn't succeed everywhere. People get in trouble because they fight, they want to do this, and then another group want to do another thing. And we have some churches where 6 or 7 groups are opposing because everybody has a better idea. And what happens then, the church at the end, a couple of years later, is demolished because it's too late. So we in university, we put together pilot project, putting people together and saying, let's build a vision. And once we have the vision, we can get the funding, and then we can do the work. But it's always goes more to a community-serving building.
But that is a project that is initiated from the university.
Yeah, well, we started it in university because I worked so long on architectural history and talking about the beauty of these buildings. And then I said, well, we're going to all to lose them. We have to become more practical and get involved and helping people. And so that's what we're doing. We have a lot of students, and now they create their own jobs because they become urban planners specialized in religious heritage. And so they spread out what we start at university. They go out with it all over the province.
What kind of what do people do in these? If you make them to a community center, what kind of business is in there?
Well, you know, every neighborhood, being in a city or a small municipality or a bigger one, they need some space for to gather, and they can have some theaters, have some shows, but again, people want to marry in the church and have a buffet, and then others want to still go on and have celebrations for those who die, and so they may be religious or not religious. but people want to gather, and this is a church building. This is the place where they used to go when there are special events in their life. And then the youngsters, they want to have some parties. Then we have a coffee shop for the elderly, because in a lot of villages and small municipalities, there are no coffee shops. And there must be, there's a small place for the post office, and then for a bank machine, a bank teller. And we try to ask, what do you need in your village, in your municipality? And we try to fix it all in one building. And that brings together the idea of the church being the meeting place for everybody.
It's really a project about cooperation as well, between different parties, the municipality, the university, the community.
It must be. We at university, we try to help. And so we try to help people come together around one vision. And then we tell them where they can find money, because there's so many programs. They can get money from the federal government, from provincial government, for several departments. And we have examples. We document every case. So we say they did that in that way, it didn't work. So maybe you better go this way. And don't ask money on that program, there's nothing left over. But the other one is coming up. And take your time, because it's going to take a couple of years. And afterwards it's going, even if you pay cash with grants, all the building costs, afterwards you still have to provide money for the maintenance, the heating, insurance. And so it's complicated, but we bring together people that succeeded with some idea, and we put together a conference, and they telling the other, we did it this way and it works. And so it's like creating a hub, a clearinghouse with good ideas. Yes. And that's the best thing we could do, because we can't help everybody. There are too many, but they help themselves.
You've studied and researched this subject for 40 years now?
Yeah, well, I was hired as a professor at university in 1972. But as I told you, my interest was about architectural history and on church building, because I wasn't born in Canada, so I came there and I find these churches so typical. And this is an important heritage, and I started to work about that. And then I moved on, helping people, saying, well, no, you can find some money to restore the church, and I can help you putting out a booklet, and so forth. And then I got involved in several projects, being myself member of a board, and then finally with some friends we bought the church, just to give an example that this can work. And
if you look 40 years ahead in time, what do you see in the Quebec province?
Well, I think in 40 years we would have about not a single parish open as it's now, worshipping in a church building. The church, the bishops in Quebec are thinking of rebuilding the church as it was in the beginnings. So doing it with people in their homes, in smaller buildings. They don't consider themselves as heritage managers, and they no longer want to use the money the church has to maintain the buildings. They want to do it, to put it on the congregations. So most of the church buildings will be converted to something else, and there, where people didn't succeed, so the church will disappear. So that would be a pity. But on 3,000 churches about, I always said if we can save 60% would be a good thing. I think that was a bit optimistic. But we save a lot of buildings, and what's important nowadays is to make sure that the best historic, the most beautiful historic churches are going to be taken care of.
Thank you very much, Professor, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
My pleasure.